Shalom. Call halal Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai Bahashim Kakadash. Double honor to the elder apostles and elder bishops of GMS, even the elders that came before them to taught us truth. Shalom and salutations to all the brothers that pushing the word of truth and in sincerity, the whole of that tabernacle of David. To the Aqua that are listening, learning, being a pillar of rest, the 144,001 third, the whole elect of Israel. And Brother Yahshua back with the World War III Daily Update. Shalom and salutations to you all. We're going to start right here in, where are we starting? Salakia. Here, Sirach 5 and 15. Be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or a small. Okay? And with that, we will go right here. This is going on right now. This is live. And the amount of information that's coming out right now in this situation right here, if you want a good perspective on what is going on in World War III right now, you got to watch this. This is amazing. Okay, Candace Owens, Syria falls, and no, it's not a good thing, according to her. Candace EP, episode 116.
Now you're going to have yours, right? That was exactly what they were doing there, okay? So, and they're supporting, again, not just the Afghans, but this international Islamist group. Okay, so now it's the end of the 1980s. The Iran-Iraq war comes to a negotiated settlement. The line really hasn't even moved. The war is essentially over as a stalemate. The Afghan war comes to an end. The Soviets withdraw, and it takes the Mujahideen about another 2 years to finish killing off the communists in Kabul. Okay, but now Saddam Hussein has a problem with Kuwait and Saudi and UAE. They're all calling in his war debts from the Iran-Iraq war. But he can't pay them off because oil's trading at about $10 a barrel. He's making no money whatsoever. And he's got the Kuwaitis are slant drilling from the shared Rumelia oil field on the Iraq-Kuwait border. And they have quotas on how much you're allowed to produce. Same as like West Texas. We own adjacent property on the ground, but we have a shared well beneath. Well, we have a quota how much we're allowed to produce each month and not cheat each other. Otherwise, you get your knees broke. That's West Texas rules. Well, the Kuwaitis were cheating. So James Baker, the Secretary of State, told Saddam Hussein, well, go ahead and break their legs. Those are the rules. See if I care. And everyone can read this in the April Glaspie memo. She was, there's the Iraqi version of it that was published in the New York Times. But then thanks to Julian Assange, we have the State Department version of the memo as well, where she says in no uncertain terms that we are slightly concerned about your military movements toward Kuwait. And gee, we really think that we would prefer if you wouldn't do something like that because we sure don't want to have a war with you, which was at the very best a mixed signal, a flashing yellow light to go ahead and invade. And Glaspie, and people can check me on this, Glaspie later told the New York Times, well, we didn't think he was going to take the whole country.
Okay, so you hear things like this, you need to know, right, how Babylon the Great had its hand in all of these wars and what has been achieved, what do they wish to achieve, and things of that nature. This is basically the backstory. So, I mean, we'll listen to a little more and then we'll worm our way out, but you should go listen to this to get a perspective on what you see going on in front of you today.
He was supposed to just take the northern oil fields, break their legs, make them pay the price. But he got carried away and went all the way to the coast.
So we're again signaling, hey, you're our ally. Do what you have to do. Take over the oil fields. We're obviously being motivated by just wanting to potentially buy oil from him. I mean, what's the motivation there to keep supporting Saddam?
Well, so yeah, that's part of it. Is they, the oil majors in Houston, they get along fine with him. They don't care who's in charge as long as the oil's pumping. And I describe in the book, my best research on this is this is not deliberate, but the way it worked was the CIA and Central Command in the region were telling the Kuwaitis, you don't have to take this from Saddam Hussein. Tell him to piss off. While at the same time, the State Department was telling Saddam Hussein, you don't have to take that guff from them. Go ahead and break their knees. Meanwhile, at the Defense Department, and I'll give them credit, Deputy Secretary of Defense for Policy Paul Wolfowitz was terrified and tried to stop it. And he convinced Secretary of Defense Cheney to convince Bush Sr. to send a letter to Hussein to try to stop it. But the letter wasn't worded strongly enough. So they tried to send another one, but it was too late. The troops were already rolling. So I don't think that they were deliberately tricking Saddam into doing this. It's essentially just the empire is too big and has too many different departments and they're not coordinated enough. So on one hand, we're telling the Kuwaitis to stick it to them. We're telling Saddam, you don't have to take that. And then the guys of the Defense Department who are alarmed and trying to stop it, they're too late to stop it. And then once he invades, though, Colin Powell, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, announces that we've decided as long as he doesn't move on Saudi Arabia, it'll be fine. And we've warned him, just don't you try to move on Saudi Arabia. But 3 days later, they changed their mind. Sorry, I'm getting too bogged down in the details here. I'll try to go faster. Margaret Thatcher from Britain says, no, you have to go because she's got investments in Kuwait and Kuwait has investments in British debt. And so it was British interests, really, that Thatcher accused Bush Sr. of being a wimp. She said, don't you go wobbly on me, Bush, meaning you can't be less of a man than me. And so he said, yeah, you're right. And so he said, this will not stand, and we're going to war. And then they spent the rest of 1991 refusing to negotiate when they could have, because at that point they'd thrown down the gauntlet. Now they have to have a war. Now, your audience, everyone remembers Iraq War I, Desert Storm, the Gulf War, Yellow Ribbon, as this great success. Our space-age technology versus their caveman status. We can fly our missiles right down their chimneys and in their windows. That was actually only about 2% of the bombs dropped, but that's what they showed us on TV, these super smart bombs. And everybody thinks it was a great success, but here's the rub. This is why I'm telling this story.
See, these are the things that you have to know. Because the devil's hand in all of this is to make you believe what he wants you to believe. It's called deception. That's why it's called the devil. The word devil means deceiver. Okay? So you have been deceived by, oh yeah, we went and did shock and awe on a whole country and it was a good thing. Right? Well, let's find out. What is he about to say right now? Okay?
At the end of Iraq War I, Bush Sr. and his men encouraged the Shiites to rise up and overthrow Saddam Hussein. Now, remember I said Saddam Hussein had invaded Iran 10 years before. But, okay, Jimmy Carter gave him the green light, but why did he want to do it? Well, he wanted to do it because Saddam Hussein was a secular Sunni sitting on a Ba'athist dictatorship ruling over a supermajority Shiite population, 60% Shiite Arabs. All the land from Baghdad to Iran and down to Kuwait is predominantly Shiite. They were mixed.
Yeah, see that whole debacle, all that division that he's talking about right there? Who do you think designed that? Okay. The guy in the picture. All right. Not that they designed the different factions, but to get them to come against each other, which I'm sure that they have been for years, but there's something called a destabilization campaign right before what? Right before you install a puppet government. It's called a coup or a color revolution. They got many names for it now, but these are tactics that come from the CIA and these top spook organizations.
It's predominantly Shiite territory, another 20% of the Kurds in the north. And then the Sunnis are another 20%, and they were dominant. So Hussein was afraid. When this Shiite revolution took hold in Iran,
what you're listening to is how what they call the stabilization of the Middle East. When they say destabilize, right, that means they got to go over there and set up, right, a situation where they're in control of the situation, and that other people are disenfranchised and are against everybody is not, cool. You have to keep it destabilized. You have to keep those people fighting against each other, because if they came together, there would be no place for the state of Israel, if you understand what's being said with that. So
that the Shiite population of Iraq, they might now choose their religious sect over their nationality and their ethnicity as Iraqis and Arabs, and they might side with the Shiites in Iran and try to wage an Islamist revolution in Iraq. So that was why he started the war, so he could conscript them all and force them to go to war with Iran rather than against him.
Got it.
Okay? So now it's 10 years later. America's just invited him into Kuwait and forced him back out again. And now Bush and his men, Bush Sr. and his men, encouraged the Shiites to rise up and overthrow Saddam Hussein.
Mm.
Have you ever seen the movie Three Kings?
No.
It's got Ice Cube and Marky Mark and Clooney, and it takes place in the aftermath of the Iraq War. Some of your audience may have seen it. It's a gold heist, but that's the setting, is the aftermath. And what's happening is the Iraqis are crushing the Sunni insurgency and forcing the refugees into Iran. What happened? What happened was Bush encouraged them, and then he betrayed them. He left them high and dry like the Bay of Pigs to be stabbed in the back and killed. 100,000 of them were massacred. He let Saddam Hussein keep his tanks and his helicopters to put down the insurrection that he had encouraged.
Wow.
Why? The answer is because the Iraqis who had chosen Iran's side in the Iran-Iraq War and had defected to Iran and even fought for Iran in the Iran-Iraq War, they were now coming across the border from Iran to lead the revolution. They were about to get Baghdad to Tehran. And so they went, oh no, we just literally, the Bush senior men were the same men who had run the Reagan administration. It was the successor administration under, Vice President Bush became President Bush. So other than Cheney, Baker and Powell and Eagleberger and Scowcroft, all of these men had been in the Reagan years. So they said, oh no, we just spent a decade supporting Saddam to contain the Iranian Shiite revolution. Now we're the ones importing it into Iraq. So they panicked and they called it off. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so Saddam crushed them. But then they said, oh no, well, we can't let him get away with that. So this became the excuse, Candace, then to stay. Now we have to have no-fly zones. Now we have to permanently enforce the blockade against Iraq. We'll never lift the sanctions until Saddam is gone because of his cruelty. And we have to continue to enforce the blockade and these no-fly zones in Iraq from bases in Saudi Arabia. And that was the primary motivating factor for turning the Arab-Afghan army that America had sponsored in Afghanistan into wanting to attack the United States of America. They started attacking the United States in 1992 at a Radisson Hotel in, I forget if it was in Aden or in Sana'a, in Yemen. Then in 1993, they tried to blow up the World Trade Center the first time. That was essentially proto-Al-Qaeda. It was Egyptian Islamic Jihad. And yes, the FBI could have stopped it, but it wasn't just a sting that they made happen as we're used to. They just fumbled the ball when they could have been heroes and they blew it. But why were these terrorists even in the country? Because the CIA let them in. Because they're friends of ours. They helped us fight the war in Afghanistan.
Right.
We like these guys. Then they attacked and killed our National Guardsmen in Saudi Arabia in 1995. Trainers training the Saudi National Guard in 1995. Then they attacked the Khobar Towers, killed 19 American airmen. 19 American airmen whose job it was to bomb Iraq.
So you can imagine, if you continue to listen to this, he's going to lead you right up to what the hell is going on right now. He's stringing the whole thing together, right? It's crazy. Anyway, I'm going to stop it right here. Where did we start? We started here, didn't we? Be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or small. Is that where we started? That's a really good one. Well, what does it all culminate into? Well, let's see. That was the quick way for me. All culminates into Revelation 11 and 14. Behold, Salakia says, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. So it doesn't really matter. Okay, you just string them along, and we understand why we're about that. Vlad Putin is about to fire nuclear missiles on Babylon the Great, and Babylon is going to fire nukes on all of their enemies as well, right? Really doesn't matter. What matters is that it's going to happen, that this is going to happen. Okay? The third woe cometh quickly. All right? That's all that matters. And that there's going to come a great earthquake caused by what? Mutually assured destruction. All right? Well, anyway, we're going to end it right there. We hope that the elect edified you, brothers and sisters. Shalom.